So now we begin the deep dive. Mario, you would have the first question of the chefs.
The first question. Well, I want to ask again is, I gave the talk and said that all this food came to the border. And I just want to know how your family's incorporated that. Since you talked that your family's influenced your cooking, I just want to know about what other foods that came with them that you prepared.
In our home?
Yes, in your home.
Well, of course, what we had tonight, or today. What other foods of indigenous nature? Or
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be sort of indigenous, but let me give you an example.
yeah,
A food that I find in many homes that they serve me is caldo de res,
absolutely.
and the different kinds of meat or bones people use.
Yeah, caldo de res. I'd forgotten about that. Absolutely, caldo de res. I remember my mother going to the market. Now, at that time, Letty, I don't know if you'll remember, but the city hall where the city hall is now, they used to have a farmer's market. You would go and she'd go buy all the fresh vegetables. And oh my God, there'd be a big pot of caldo de res, and it was so much fun. Another example, I don't know, capirotada.
Capirotada, yes.
Yeah, capirotada is another one. Oh, during Lent on Fridays, she would always have capirotada, and I love to make it also. I don't know, empanadas de calabaza.
Can you talk about, what kind of bones they use for the caldo? Was it shank or was it rib bones? Or
It was shank. It was shank.
Con el
Yes.
tuétano.
Sí, con el tueto. Exactly. Yeah. And one thing my mother did, which I'm not sure other people did, but my mother always would put sweet potatoes in the caldo de res, which is. Did your mom do that, Letty? No. Huh? No, just white. Yeah, no, she would put sweet. Well, she would put some white, but also sweet, which I don't know anyone else. My cookbook has sweet potato, and I note in there, that was my mother's thing, and so that's how I make it. But it's kind of cool because it's the sweet and the salty, and of course, packed with vitamins. So, what else?
Well, can you explain the capirotada culturally, what it means, and also the significance of it, and also how did they make the capirotada?
Well, capirotada is old bread. You make a tea, with anise and cinnamon and sugar.
Piloncillo?
Piloncillo, yes. Piloncillo, anise. No sugar. It's piloncillo and anise and cinnamon. Those three things. So you brew a tea. You make a bunch of it, and you take your day-old bread. Okay. And you toast it. I toast it anyway, a little bit, and then you start layering it. It was so funny because when I was doing my cookbook, I was like, I was talking to different people in my restaurant, the employees, and some said, no, it's got to be white cheese, and then other people would say, no, it's got to be yellow cheese, and it just depended where they were from. So one day I'm in Brownsville, and I'm at this little restaurant, El Torito, and they had a sign there. And I said, what kind of cheese do you put in it? And they said, oh, yellow and white. And I thought, oh, wow. This is the border. This is like fusion food, right? So I went ahead and did mine, either or. And it just depends where you're from. And then what else you put? My mother would always put raisins, but it's kind of like mole or like, people can put any kind of fruit that they want. My mother always put raisins. And you soak them in the tea so they'll plump up. And you start layering it. And then you bake it, and it's ready when it puffs up. That means all the flavors, the cheeses are melted, everything, all the flavors are together. So, and it's one of my favorite things to eat.
Liliana, do you have a question, Liliana?
Yeah, raisins.
You want to ask a question?
Both cheeses, see? From Brownsville. Yeah. So it's a cooking tradition. So yeah, I was like, because I wanted to make sure. The other thing I did was I was thinking, okay, well, my cookbook will be used in Texas, surely, but it could be in other parts of the country, or it could be, who knows. So I was using pan francés because that's what my mother would use. like the bolillos or whatever. And then I thought, well, what if they can't get a hold of that? So I just decided to use good old-fashioned white bread, which anybody could source. And so that's how I made it in my cookbook. But, I wanted it to be something that if somebody wanted to make it, they wouldn't be bogged down because they couldn't get the kind of bread. But my mother would, what we call pan francés, which was like a giant bolillo. And we get in the panaderia near our house. So, any other?
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answers. Liliana, do you have a question?
I don't know if you had some, wanted to share or anything.
Oh, the same question? Yeah. It was a bunch of things, obviously, but one of them for sure was like a picadillo.
Oh, yeah.
The way my mom would make it was with whatever we had. So sometimes we didn't have certain things, so she would implement different things. But it was always like carne molido that they would have in the freezer, papas. And my favorite, when she would add nopales, like nopalitos in there, was so good. That was my favorite way to eat it. Sometimes green beans, if they had them. Always corn though. That was one of my favorite things, like to eat. I think growing up, that is like super like comida casera. I think that most people are familiar with. I feel like, but everyone has their own version of it. Kind of like you were saying, like with mole and like different things. Like everyone.
Cooks get creative.
Yeah, and then also with what you have, like
Yeah, what's inexpensive?
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah, what's available, what's
Whatever's
inexpensive.
accessible.
Yes.
Luis?
Caviar.
Oh,
On potato chips or what?
No, for me in my house, it was guiso everything, right? Calabacita con elote y carne de puerco, or just a beef with potatoes, bacon. I mean, literally anything. It was almost always. My parents did not believe in eating out. We ate at home. I had no idea if we were poor or not. All I knew is that I was never going to get McDonald's. We lived in a world of mañana. Everything was mañana. You want the Power Ranger that just came mañana. Everything was mañana. But what was certain was that we were always going to have beans. We were always going to have some sort of either rice or sopa de fideo, sopa de codito, sopa de estrella, sopa de algo, and a guiso. That was you could not falter from that. That was just something we were going to eat. And that's followed me through now, because although we do go out to eat, I force my kids to eat, not literally force, I force my kids to eat a guiso a couple times a week, because I'm like, no, this is gonna follow you. Like, as much as we're growing and evolving and having new things, my kids are half Colombian, so we're doing a lot of different cultural foods, but the one thing that is just so dear to me was my grandma's guiso with bacon, and she would switch it up whenever they had a little bit of extra money, and that was the thing for me, was guisos.
I think another one also was really important is just frijoles. That's for everybody. I feel like growing up, sometimes we didn't have a lot, and there was a period of time when we just ate just beans with like tortilla. And I would take that sometimes to school, and it would get like made fun of. But I remember when I was a kid, I would always think like, oh, I'm gonna hate beans later in life. Like I'm gonna never eat beans again. And when I left home, that followed me also, like you were saying, like that followed me and stayed with me. And my favorite thing to eat is beans. Beans on tortillas, on a piece of bread, whatever, just beans. Beans. Beans.
I wanted to add something else, another thing that we eat a lot of, or we did it and that's pasta. So fideo or conchitas.
Conchitas.
And so anything that would extend the meat, right? And fill little tummies, right. So, but the interesting thing about the way we cook pasta, which some of you may know, maybe not everybody, but we always we brown it in a little bit of oil. It gets browned to a golden color, so it adds flavor and it's more it looks prettier. And so, yeah, so pasta was something that, to ground beef, to chicken, to pork, to, whatever, yeah. It was a big part of our diet. Was that your
No.
experience?
Yes, very much so. Yes.
So it was sort of bulky food
Yeah, bulk it up, yeah, carbs.
to fill you up.
Filled you up, yeah, and it's tasty, to this day, I love it.
Yes.
I have fideo in my restaurant, I serve it as a soup because I thought that some of my customers wouldn't understand if we did just like a dry fideo, so I make it in a soup. And so I thought that would be easier for people to understand, and it sells a lot, Mexican chicken noodle soup, so.
Great. Liliana?
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Liliana.
Huh?
So I have a couple questions or comments. One is, can you hear me? Oh, okay. One is a question about the carne guisada. So my mom is from Monterrey, Nuevo León, and she prepares a lot of the foods that are very typical of working class communities, like the fideo, right? Conchitas con frijoles, and there's
Right.
always a pot of beans. And my mom has always been very, I come from a family of bakers, so it's always been about, what is accessible, but also what is not expensive.
Right.
What foods can we make that can feed and we can stretch, the
meat.
food, the meat. And, interestingly, my mom didn't grow up with a lot of meat, growing up, But when she immigrated to the United States, she learned a lot of different dishes, like carne guisada. And it's not a dish that she grew up in Monterrey, but it's a dish that she prepares here, well, in San Antonio. Mostly because my brother growing up wanted carne guisada. So my question is, how do you all prepare your carne guisada? I'm interested to know if there are differences in how you prepare the carne guisada. And the other question I have is, and it's really a question for me, but I'm just, as someone who's on a plant-based diet, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how do I recreate some of these recipes that are meat-based, but how can I make them in a way that embodies the flavors that you use, right? The ingredients, the salsas, the sazon, but without the meat. And maybe, I don't know, when I stepped on stage, it brought me back to, 15 years ago when my stepdad would make mollejas. And it was like this memory. Yeah.
Well, I just work with flavors. Chiles. You can work with chiles. But when I say chile, I don't mean like you're going to burn your mouth up. But the chiles will bring a lot of flavor, the chile guajillo in particular. And lots of onion and garlic. Those three together. And the appropriate amount of salt. The role of salt in a recipe is as a flavor enhancer. So if your ratio of salt to the rest of your ingredients in your recipe is of course it's too much. If it's too much salt, it's salty. But if it's low, then your flavors are sleepy. So you want to make sure you add the optimum amount of salt to bring out all your flavors. But that should, you combine those ingredients together and perhaps, you can take one of the, what do they call it, Beyond, or what is it,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Beyond Burger, Beyond.
yeah, something like that crumbled up, and then maybe try kind of like the sauce that I did in the carne guisada. You might be able to do like a guiso type, like he was saying. And try to get close to something like that. I've never done it before, but,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah. Or even trying jackfruit, like Chef Nadia was saying, with a barbacoa. Like, that can maybe work, you know what I mean? The textures of jackfruit, when it's cooked down like that, has almost that, mimic of, like, stewed meat. So, try that.
That sounds amazing.
Also, my grandma and my mom would thicken it up with masa.
See, that's what I was going to ask, if you use flour.
And sometimes she would use flour, but most part they would use masa.
Okay.
Or my mom would make. But
For the carne asada, we do add a little bit of flour. But we do it in a roux.
I didn't grow up with carne guisada. I'm from Monterrey, and that was not a thing. I learned how to make that from a white person, like 5 years ago. It's really yummy. It's, dried peppers and slow cooking is probably the biggest thing that I got out of it was just slow cook it. Exactamente. Asada de puerco. Sí.
See, yeah, I've made como carne, what is it, the carne de puerco en salsa verde con verdolagas, but I don't eat pork, so what I've done is I've substituted the pork with cauliflower. I still make the salsa verde, but add verdolagas.
That's right. We're literally rejecting. So I'm about to say something that's going to get me canceled.
Gonna get me canceled.
Okay. Okay, we
And that's
need
the
a
end of
third
that.
time now.
No, I had a very ignorant disdain towards vegetarians and vegans. Growing up in a land where every single meal is meat-based and where I'm killing my own animals and all that kind of thing, and it's fun. Hunting is fun, like all that stuff. I just didn't get it, didn't understand it. So much like everything I like to do in life is I like to be educated, I like to be informed. So if I'm not going to like you, I need to know why I don't like you, so that I can have a good argument, obviously. But so what I did is I ended up, word of mouth. I asked, hey, how do you learn how to make this? And so that took me through to Southern Indian vegetarian cuisine.
Yeah.
There's a really cool place in Dallas called Kalajanji's, and they do a phenomenal job. And through that, I met someone who was a gourmet raw food chef, and so I trained under her for a couple of years, and I learned really how to appreciate a plant-based diet, and more so because in Dallas, I don't know about everywhere else in the world, but in Dallas, most vegan restaurants or vegetarian restaurants just fry everything. Or put, artificial meats in everything. And for me, it's like in Mexico, when I have a vegetarian meal, it's very veggie heavy.
Yeah.
It's it's a ritual. It's something that in my ignorance, all I knew was, if you're a vegetarian, you eat processed cheese and you fry everything, and then it all tastes the same. It all tastes like chicken. So that's a big thing for me, is like having that appreciation, now the understanding of where and why we do things, right? Because you think it's dietary or you think it's political. Like that was my thing. I thought every vegetarian and vegan was political. They're doing it to prove a point, and diet is just an excuse. And it wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. And there are so many beautiful things that you can turn into, its own protein that doesn't have to be a fake Philly cheesesteak or whatever.
Before we pass on to the chefs who are here, Dr. Bush, would you like to ask a question?
Is my mic working? It's working. First, thank you, Chef Sylvia, for bringing up the salt. Something that the academics mentioned, but Caddo. Salt trade. Salt in pre-settlement. Yeah, thank you. Salt in pre-settlement times was such an important trade item. Caddos would extract salt from Saline Springs up in the Caddo region, and people, other indigenous people, would come from great distances to acquire Caddo salt. And of course, salt deposits in West Texas, out near the New Mexico border, that were important, I think, in Spanish to the Spanish. They kept finding them and forgetting about them and refinding them, and hey, there's salt out here. So thank you for that. Since we're talking tradition and innovation this afternoon, my question for you all is, when you're creating a new dish, how do you know when you have found exactly the soul of that dish? This is right. Or maybe the side question, this will sell in my restaurant, whether, even if it's not quite the perfect, heavens open and this is the dish. How do you know?
Sure.
All right.
For me, when I know I've made a recipe that I know, or I feel is like the way I want it or the way it should be portrayed. It's just if it reminds me of home. Basically, if it just takes me back, or if it reminds me of my grandparents, or my parents, or anyone else, or my great grandmother. So that's for me. As far as like putting it on a menu, that I don't really care about. I'll put anything on the menu that I feel, like with the Moejas thing, or at Con Todo if you go, like we don't do any substitutions. We don't do any off-menu items. I will not tone down spices or flavors. I do things the way they were prepared before, and I don't want to cover that up. Like it's important to me, so
Wonderful.
that's how I feel about that.
Very cool. I have
Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Well, when I opened the trailer, the patrons of the place are predominantly just white males, and we would get a lot of complaints. Like people wanted queso, or they wanted just like I guess like Tex-Mex stuff that we weren't serving. And I used to have forks, and I used to have plastic utensils that I would give with the plates. And I saw someone eating their taco like this. And I was like, And to me, eating with my hands, eating with your hands is really important, you know. Like it was spoke about, was it today or yesterday?
Yeah.
Diane?
Yeah, they were like,
Diana.
you were speaking about that. And I was like, oh, that's super cool because, you know, growing up at home, when we eat with, we don't really, and we'll eat tacos, but like we'll eat with a tortilla with our hands. And my partner as well, she's from the Philippines, and a lot of them over there, but they eat with their hands with rice, and they pick up a piece of meat and they push it into their mouth with their thumb. So to me, eating with your hands is really important, and it's the best way to experience a taco. And food tastes better like that. Like, so that's one reason why I stopped using utensils. Actually, I have a case, but it's just sitting back there, not being touched.
So I worked when I graduated from college, I was supposed to be a home economics teacher from UT Austin. Well, what happened to become a home ec teacher, you had to take, well, it was a Bachelor of Science. So that's how I ended up working at Uncle Ben's in their research and development. I just kind of fell into it when I was student teaching, and I got offered the job, and woohoo! And so I did 10 years of that. So one of the things I did was I conducted their taste panels. So a taste panel is it's a semi-scientific method of analyzing the flavor of food. And so I did that for 3 years. That was one of my jobs. And then I did recipe testing and development and all that. So when I'm working on a recipe, and it's been a while since I've done a brand new one because we're very established and we do 14 different sauces for our 20 different enchiladas. So it's like, you know, my kitchen's busy. But so when I get to the point where, and I have this numerical system in my head and I go, is this a 5, an 8, a 10? I'm looking for 10 because 10 is like, that's it, I'm there. Looking for a flavor explosion. But then the other thing I do is I will have a little taste panel, and I will make people, or not make people, ask people to, you know, that I know have a great palate, and they're to taste it and evaluate it, but I don't want to hear their comments. I make them write it down, which is what we did in the taste panels, because the power of suggestion is very strong. If somebody says, oh, this is, you know, I really love this. This is, you know, then somebody else right away. So I want to know what you think. Do you like it? Do you know? So that's what I do. So I verify myself by going to, you know, to the next level and making sure that, you know, that I'm hitting it. And so that's what I've done. So that's but it's because of my work background and the 10 years of working in this food lab. And, you know, unbeknownst to me, that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. At the time, I didn't know it. And then, of course, I was supposed to be a teacher. And then in 2005, I opened a cooking school. So I also teach cooking classes in my spare time. So, and it's the food that we're talking about today that I do. Of course, enchiladas, but then I do other stuff too. So, yeah, I share the knowledge.
I was gonna say that I don't care what people like. I make what I want. But I was way off. I mean, truly, I really do. Like when I'm putting something out, I'm making it for me, right? Because I eat at my place 6 days a week, at least. And so that's like a big thing. Is like, there's a lot of places that, like your molleja taco. I hate mollejas. Just in general, like I just don't get it. Prepare them really, really well. I had your taco and I loved it. And here's the thing: is a lot of times you eat something and it's so rich that you're done with it. That taco that I had today is a very craveable taco. I want to have that again.
Yes.
And that's what I go for when I put something out on my menu is can I eat it today and can I maybe pick it up on Wednesday or for, lunch and dinner or something like that. And that's my big thing. That's my takeaway.
Thank you. It's inspiring. I love this when chefs tell you what they really are driven by. Le doy la palabra a los otros chefs, the other visiting chefs, if you want to make a comment or ask a question. Dámelo. Okay. Anybody?
You guys are so shy.
Everyone's
That's-
shy.
Dr. Bush, that's the million-dollar question in culinary school. How do I get it to taste like yours? All the time, students are like, but is mine gonna come out like that? I'm like, probably not. We can try. And how do you train young palates to get guided by their intuition, but also utilize the technicality that we're practicing to be technical and intuitive, right? And it starts by relinquishing previous, like for example, they think I love salty food, and it's so disrespectful to hear that because I'm like, I like well-seasoned food. First of all, you're using the wrong salt. And then but I start that by having a salt tasting. So this is iodized salt, this is non-iodized, this is kosher, this is Morton, this is flake salt, this is sal del rey salt, right? And we go through all that frequencies of taste so then they can then understand the power of salt so that I can stop getting told I like salty food. Then I suggest that they go to the local raspa stand and try a salty dog raspa that's only out of salt and lime and understand the power of acid with salt. And hopefully at the end of the course, I tell them they are now orchestrators of flavors. So the woodwinds, the brass, they are the ones dictating a balanced sound, right? They grow up one sound, one band, one whatever. That's what we're trying to aim for in a dish. The acids, the heats, the salt, the fat. And if we blend all together with your intuitive, right, flavor, that's how you'll know this is it. This is ready. Until I tell you it needs more salt.
It needs more salt. Now that's a...
Well, I'm from Laredo and my restaurant's in Laredo, and I think I have a pretty good idea of what our community likes, like flavor profile wise. So I think similarly, I always try to, when I'm developing a dish, I try to just hit that sweet spot, that'll blend the condiments, and the seasoning. And then, of course, lastly, I give everything to my wife to taste, and she's like, yes, or no, it needs work or something, But that's kind of, I'm just really in tune to what the flavors profile that our community has. So I try to kind of build close to that.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to add to Liliana's comment about the vegan options. And this is nothing new, but in case you haven't heard of it before, the Jamaica, you can just keep soaking it until you get all the sour tart taste out of it, and you can cook it and it turns into meat texture.
I love it.
But you can cut it because sometimes I've had it with like the whole flour and never again. It's very hard to swallow. And I had a question for the panel. How do you think, how do you differentiate, or what do you think is like the big step from becoming a cook or a chef to a business owner? Or what would you tell someone that is, like, that loves food, that wants to own a business? Because I feel like we don't talk about enough how difficult and what the differences are. And how much you have to step away from the kitchen once you actually run a business. So what are some advices or anything that goes along that question?
Luis, you want to start?
Sylvia's been doing a great job of starting.
Okay, Sylvia?
Okay, well, I had this aha moment during the pandemic. I was interviewed by somebody in the media in Houston, and I forget what the question was that she asked me, but I just kind of like, it just became very apparent to me. It was a moment of tremendous clarity that it was God's amazing grace is why I was still standing and why I hadn't gone under all those years, because all I really knew was about food when I jumped into the food business, into the restaurant business. I had worked in R&D, which is a cocoon. You work with like the same 15 people, and you don't know anything else. And then I went into 8 years of food service sales, which was my introduction to restaurants, and where I developed the curiosity and the courage to dive in. Never having worked in a restaurant in my life, I dived in. So I would say, as I look back on all the mistakes and near misses and everything that I've had, try to minimize the amount of debt that you have, as little debt as possible, because like what happens if you get in a scrape, you might not survive because you have to service debt. So I always did my restaurants, whenever I've opened one, just out of my savings. I just did my life savings into my first one. And I think that was the question that she asked me, and I thought, wow, as little as I knew about the business end of it. And that's why a lot of chef-driven restaurants don't make it, because we don't know the business end of it, and some of us are not numbers oriented, starting with me. I'm a big picture person, and I knew a lot about food, and I knew marketing, and I knew this, and I knew that, but the business end of it, I was very lame. And so, but I did know how to manage money. I always treated my income like it didn't belong to me, it belonged to the business. So I wasn't taking money out of it. I drew a modest salary. Get a really good accountant to manage all of your business details. That's really important in your taxes. What else? Yeah, just preserve your cash, control your costs. I think that I was good about that, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't know. And I didn't know, like, I really didn't know how to read a P&L for a restaurant. So I was just sort of winging it. I was just doing the best I could. And one day I found out from my accountants, and I have accountants in Houston that specialize in restaurants. So I found out that my numbers were amazing. Well, I never knew it, that my percentages on this and that and the other, and I was just doing the best I could. Of course, I was always there. I lived in my restaurants. I managed them from open to close. I had no life. I never traveled. I never did or went anywhere. I didn't even go to movies or eating out, nothing. On my day off, I was, as probably a lot of you're doing things for the restaurant. So that's what I would say. If I can think of anything critical, I'll grab for the mic again. But
Can somebody ask Siri what are savings?
No.
yeah, that's the other thing. I spoke at a graduation recently, and I told the grads, learn to live on less than you make. And that's the one thing my father and my parents, particularly my father, said, if you get a raise, don't spend it. Live on less than you make. So I always had, I just
Yeah.
figured out how to live on less than I made.
I'm a
always.
millennial,
Uh-oh.
so
See, I'm not. Y'all did the math on my career. So,
as any good millennial, I suffer from a healthy case of imposter syndrome. But I'm also first generation Mexican American, so I have baby boomer spirit in me, and those two are a balance of never giving up, and then constantly doubting yourself. So that's a very beautiful toxic balance that I think a restaurateur or me myself, what I have and what has driven me, because somebody reached out to me recently and was like, hey, were you aware that like the last 50 best U.S. Bon Appetit nominees in the Metroplex have all shut down except for you? And I'm like, well, that's just because I refuse to quit, not because I should still be open, because I've made all the mistakes that anybody could have made. But I found that I never wanted to do this thing by myself. I'm the only owner, but I've tried to do this with a cousin or with to kind of have that balance, because I've always been told in a business you're married to the business, and it's a relationship that you have to work, whatever. I accredit absolutely all of my success to my parents, who don't let me quit, also because they keep telling me I'm good at something, and my staff. Like my staff is just, I'm here because my staff is there, and yeah, I mean, it's just they are I have 50 first cousins, and my dad has 10 siblings, my mom has 5 siblings, and like I said, they all came to my house. And so me and my big sister, my little sister came 7 years later, but me and my big sister, we were on the microscope of the Americans who have everything and should succeed naturally because blah, 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 and the microscope and all that. So like all those things were drivers to say, yes, I've fallen, but I mean, I don't think you get it. I'm nothing special. I don't think you get into this business with the assumption that you're going to succeed. You get into this business knowing that you're going to struggle and that you're going to make people happy. And I think that's enough, is that you're going to make, you're going to F people's palates, is what I always say. But sorry.
That's beautiful.
Excuse my language.
That's wonderful. What a beautiful. We're going to take just one question from the audience. Did you want? No, please. Sorry.
For me, I mean, I'm still learning a lot. My food trailer, Con Todo, is only like a year and a half old. And it's my first time ever owning a business. I do have a business partner, but at the same time, like, I'm still learning like a ton of things as I go as well. Like failing a lot, messing things up, or trying to figure out what to do next. It's doing good so far, but like I said, I'm still learning. So I'm super green compared to like everyone else that has had a restaurant that's established. So all I can do is just keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, sorry. Wait, well, go ahead, please.
So I had a beautiful moment 10 years ago at a restaurant after my grandmother had died, and it was with the arroz. And I am wondering if you experienced that, or if you had one of your customers experience a worldly, out of this world type of experience with food, where it kind of like you became a healer with the food. And what I mean by that is, I was eating with my family who's here, and I could feel her presence. And when I tasted the arroz, automatically a tear came out because she was with me. She was with us.
Wow.
And so I'm wondering if you had that moment yourself or with someone else. And the mesero came and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Please let them know this is the best." And I have her recipe, and I plan to share it with my boys and show them and all that. But I'm wondering if you think of yourselves as a
I have many, many times, different dishes, the rice, the beans, the mole, just different, the carne guisada. People have told me, oh, this is just like my mother's, or this is amazing. I haven't eaten this in 20, I've heard that through the 20-something years that I've been doing this. Yeah, in fact, I was telling one of the chefs here, I said that one thing I learned is that you memorize flavors, your palate memorizes flavors, and if you eat something that you had 10 or 20 years ago or whatever, and you eat it, it'll take you right back there, and it can become an emotional experience, or like, it's like you're there, or, yeah.
For me, it's happened a few times at the trailer. It happened recently. We had a special. There was a gordita. It was just filled with beans and a little bit of cheese. Someone came and ordered it, and then they came back and ordered more for their friends, and they were telling me how much that reminded them of their abuela, and they were going on about it. So that was like super nice to hear. And for me, just lost my train of thought.
The gordita.
I'm sorry?
The gordita.
Yeah, the gordita. But so that was having that experience from someone else. As far as me, like having that experience, I've definitely had it like a few times. The most recent one was at Cochinita and Co. So my favorite way to eat a tamal is the next day after they've made them, and just on a comal, just tostado like that.
Yes, yes.
And it's like crispy in the outside, and it's really nice and tender and still soft in the middle, with just like a salsita, just like that. That's my favorite way to eat a tamal. And when I was doing pop-ups for Con Todo, that's the way I would make a tamal. I would, steam it, and then I would cool them down, and then the next day we'd have the pop-up, and we would just, on the plancha, just toast them. So that's my favorite way to eat it. So to me, that like really took me home really quick. She didn't. It was funny. We went over there yesterday, and just for whatever reason, not making the connection when I saw her, and we sat down and ate, and I was like, oh crap, this tamal. Like took me home really quick. So thank you.
I can attest I had the same experience when I had the tamal and you toast it.
That's all my mom. I can't take any credit. She makes the tamales.
I think a lot of specifically what you said when you got up and spoke yesterday really resonated and I felt deeply. A few years ago, I was going through a very difficult time, and I called my grandma, my mom's mom, who's like my Catholic rock. And I was like, Grandma, like, I need help. Can you like, I don't know, speak to God with me? Can you pray with me? And my grandma like paused for a while, and she says to me, praying is a very intimate thing. It's something I do in silence, and it's something I do with myself and with God only. You have to find a way to do that for yourself. At the time, I wanted to slam the phone, but that really, it really made me do a lot of searching for what even that meant, because I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to speak to any higher being. I don't know how to do any of that because I always shut myself down, right? I'm not allowed to. It's probably one of the only practices is when I'm about to cook. Like this food that y'all had, I'm sorry if you're not into God, but it was prayed over, several dozen times. And it's not, please God, don't let me fail. It's I'm giving you all I have. Please let it be enough. Please let me. That I have had. Who asked the question? I have had one or two people come up to me and specifically with the cabrito, actually, that some lady came up to my mom and she's crying or whatever. Those are beautiful, beautiful moments. But I purposely don't read reviews and I try to stay as far away from any kind of positive or negative criticism with my food, because I make very few things, and those things I make them with a lot of passion and a lot of love, and I give that away, and that's enough. That's all. I don't need any more.
Wow. Thank you so much. We're going to close this down and go to the next session. I'll hand it over to Beto, which will include thanking the sous chefs who've been with us. But before we do that, let's thank our chefs and our panel.
That was awesome. Thank you, Adnan. Before you all leave for the afternoon or what have you, there's a little yellow card that is outside, and on it is a QR code that has a restaurant guide that can help you. Is this on?
No.
I don't think so, right?
Testing.
All right. That's better. Oh, wow. Much better.
Okay.
So there's this little yellow card. It's got a restaurant guide with a QR code on it.
Cochinita is number one, and Sylvia is number one on the list.
Wonderful. So great spots. I want to just begin my comments by again echoing what I said yesterday. I want to thank, obviously, the sponsors that have helped make this event possible. The City of Houston, the Mayor's Office, Susan Christian, who is here, a good friend of mine for many years. We've co-chaired events together, and I'm so glad that she is here today. Please recognize Christian with a round of applause. You've heard from HEB earlier today. There are other sponsors as well that we had. Soulfit Grill, the Texas Buffalo Project. Sorry, my glasses are off. I should put them back on. Texas Tech University Press. Go Red Raiders. Company I work for, BC Global. I'm glad to do that.
The mic turned off.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to speak loudly. How's that? Ekin Properties and Mecca, which is here today. We've had, thank you, even better, get another mic. We've had a wonderful time. We've had some local chefs that have been here as well. I don't see any of them in my view and stuff, but we are also on the east end of Houston, and I wanted to recognize Francis Castaneda-Diaz, who represents the East End Chamber of Commerce. Before I turn it over to Christine, my son is with me today. I will just indulge in one little story, and that is my wife couldn't be here because she's on call this weekend. And when we were dating, of course, anybody who's dating someone, you're trying to figure out if you're going to like each other. And then, she said, "Can I make you something for dinner? I'll come over and make you something for dinner." I was like, "Sure." "What would you like?" I was like, "Do you know how to make fideo?" She did. It worked. It's awesome. We're married. Let me turn it over to Christine Ortega.
The power of fideo.
Thank you, Beto. Yes, fideo is always a way to have family over and have fun with fideo. And if people don't know what fideo, look on that restaurant card, go to Sylvia's restaurant. You are totally missing out a family experience. This evening was made possible, as Beto said, by many sponsors. You couldn't be here without them. But we could not have pulled this off without the valiant effort by all of our sous chefs and our kitchen staff. They were, I'm gonna ask everybody to come up. Vanessa Hernandez, keep going. Daniel Rodriguez, Eloína Torres, Catherine Mesa, Patti Cantu, Lucia Ortega, Rosalinda Fernandez, and Gabby Velasquez. These men and women are amazing. I don't know if you've ever worked in a kitchen like they have, but they brought so much grace. They brought so much patience with all of the asks, all of the fancy footwork that they did in the kitchen to get our evening and our evening dinner kicked off, to get our breakfast served, and to get our lunch served. So please, another round of applause for our help. Thank you very much. And did I mention everybody's name? Did I leave anybody out? Everybody was mentioned. Okay, good. Did I mention Daniel? Yes. Did I mention Luis? Yes. Okay, we're good. All right. So the other thing I wanted to do was recognize our advisory committee. They included Beto Cárdenas, as you know, Elmer Rogers, Susan Christian, Francis Castañeda, Leti Fernandez, and Rachel Galan. Again, they pinch hit. When we hit snags along the way, they totally stepped up. So again, thank you to them. Thank you to our board, who is, I think we have one of our board members here, Patricia Castillo, flew in from San Antonio. So thank you to our board, Dr. Jimenez, Dr. Montaño. Again, great people who are behind the scenes making some of these things happen. And then we do have a show this evening, right? We have film happening with some of the scholars. There's still, I think, maybe 10 spots available. So if you haven't registered and you wanted to come, you got to sign up on the Encuentro website. It's a free ticket, but you have to register. And I think we maybe have 10 spots left. If you can't make it, it will also be live streamed, so we can send you a virtual link if you can't actually get the ticket. So be mindful of that. And then I think Rebel kicked us off really well earlier today when she had us just kind of pause for a moment about people who have been here before. So like we started the program, I'd like for us to also end the program, which is that we should acknowledge all the people who were here gathered before us and recognize the traditional homelands of the Atacapa Ixac, Acoquisa, Cado, Coahuiltecan, and Comanche people, and all of their relations and all of the trading partners who visited here, including us today. So with that, we'll close and hopefully see you this evening.